RT has been granted a rare opportunity to visit Russia's crucially important military aviation center in Lipetsk, where they say they teach aircraft to fight and pilots to win.
The Lipetsk Aviation Center is a school of excellence. Our task is to teach pilots in the Air Force the most difficult types of flight training. Our task is to retrain the flight personnel for new and modernized equipment. Also, one of the main tasks is the testing of new aircraft systems entering the service.
The center also provides a training ground for some of the country's renowned aerobatic teams. The brilliant Falcons of Russia are based here. They are the undisputed elite of the country's aerospace forces. The history of the Lipetsk Aviation Center dates back to the First World War. In the 1920s, the aviation school was set up for future Soviet pilots. However, it closed rather quickly, and instead, a little later, a very unusual training center was founded here.
The governments of the Soviet Union and Germany agreed to hide a secret flight test school for training German pilots and testing the latest aviation technology here in Lipetsk. As we know from history, the Germans were forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles to have an air force on their own soil. The school operated here from 1925 to 1933 until Hitler came to power. During that period, more than 450 German pilots were trained here.
Several years later, tactical flight courses were reopened in Lipetsk, and since then, they have not stopped training domestic military pilots here. Today, the Lipetsk Aviation Center is perfecting the skills of the flight personnel of the Russian airspace forces, training young officers to deal with various types of combat fighters and providing manuals and instructions for the country's latest jets. Young lieutenants are taught here to fly the new and modernized aircraft that are now entering service in Russia. Everything related to modern military aviation is important here. Therefore, while undergoing training, pilots are able to perform a full range of combat missions assigned to them. They take theoretical courses and conduct training flights. A reliable, multi-role, time-tested Su-30SM is a two-seat jet. It is controlled by a pilot and a navigator. But here at the Lipetsk Training Center, often senior pilots fly with youngsters, sharing their knowledge with them. Полетели.
Release the brakes, increase thrust, afterburner, we're gaining speed, 100, 150, 200, 250, pull up, landing gear up, we're gaining speed, now you can pilot the plane.
Crews of multi-role aircraft like the Su-30 and Su-35, the Su-34 fighter bombers, the modernized MiG-29 fighters, and the Su-25 ground attack aircraft take part in the center's routine training. All these combat machines serve in the Lipetsk Aviation Regiment, which is part of the center. By the way, it's celebrating its 80th anniversary this year. The onboard equipment and armament of modern aircraft allow the military to carry out combat missions at any time of the day, regardless of the season and weather. And here they are, all the delights of flying in winter. Poor visibility, a blizzard, the need to de-ice the runway and check the aircraft for icing. Such hostile weather requires serious efforts to complete combat missions, and only the strongest can cope. We are in central Russia. It's minus 20 outside, windy, very harsh conditions. But for people who work here, this is just their daily routine. No matter whether it's hot or freezing cold, technicians and mechanics begin preparing the plane 4 hours prior to its departure. And at the end of the flights, they walk around their machines again for another 2 or 3 hours until the planes are rolled off to the parking lot. Pilots have different exercises depending on weather conditions. In good weather, they can perform flights at extremely low altitudes, while air display teams can perfect their aerobatic stunts. During difficult weather conditions, flights are aimed at fulfilling tasks above the clouds or at a firing range. Due to dense cloud, fog or at night time, pilots use coordinates which are received in advance to precisely fire at ground targets. The handsome Su-35S is an air superiority fighter. but it can easily destroy ground or naval targets if bombs are attached to some of its 12 weapon hardpoints. In order to begin its interceptor mission using air-to-air missiles, it must first get rid of those bombs to become much lighter and more maneuverable. The Sukhoi Su-35 is the latest member of the flanker family. It is, of course, a derivative of the Cold War-era Su-27. It is an air superiority fighter and a strike aircraft with massively improved avionics, airframe and engines. It won't be a mistake if I say that currently this is the world's most maneuverable fighter in service, and it can hold its own against any existing aircraft.
I will say in simple words, this aircraft allows you to land in any weather at any airfield. It can destroy any targets regardless of where they are, in the air or on the ground. So I think, and this is the opinion of many pilots of our regiment, that the Su-35 is the best aircraft in the Russian armed forces today. Why doesn't the enemy like it? First, they have not come across it, they don't know this plane, and if an engagement occurs, they will lose 100% because there is no equal rival to this plane in the world.
The cockpit of the Su-34 fighter bomber, commonly known as the Duckling, can be built as the business class of fighter cockpits. Here you can even draw yourself up to your full height during a flight, if of course you're not very tall. You can also warm up food and drink hot tea from the onboard flask. The cockpit of this aircraft is designed in a way that the pilot and navigator do not sit one behind the other, but shoulder to shoulder.
I always wanted to fly this Su-34, and it worked out. I'm happy. My dream has come true. When you get into the cockpit of this aircraft for the first time and start performing flights, you immediately feel the navigator's shoulder, his help. You quickly get used to this and start to love this aircraft.
Probably the presence of a more comfortable cockpit in the Su-34 once allowed General Sushkov and his navigator to make a non-stop flight from Lipetsk to Komsomolsk-on-Amur flying this aircraft. The pilots conducted two air-to-air refuel missions, spending 9 hours en route, a record that no one has yet broken.
At the moment, I cannot imagine an aviation complex, an aircraft without a pilot. So far, we do not have airplanes that would fully possess human intelligence and could independently perform tasks. But a lot of work is being done in this direction. A lot of unmanned aerial vehicles of various functions are being developed, and they can take over some of the tasks that the pilot used to do. But at the present time, the pilot is indispensable in the aircraft. So today we train top-class pilots in schools, including the Lipetsk Center.
Often in aviation, all the attention and admiration go to those who are in spotlight, and those are the pilots. But this is not entirely fair. The flight control team is responsible for managing aircraft movement. They help the planes to take off and land safely and also provide assistance to the flight crew in case of an emergency.
This is the nerve center of all the flights. Here, we lead the pilot. We say where to fly, at what altitudes. We are the eyes of the pilots on the ground. We see them, they do not see us. So we help them to carry out their missions.
By the way, when it comes to the most technically difficult tasks for pilots, they usually do not mention the weather. But they do note that air-to-air refueling, close-range combat at low altitude, and perhaps landing on a deck require real art. Although the deck maneuver is not particularly relevant, given that Russia is not eager to build aircraft carriers because it has a defensive doctrine.
In recent years, technology has been moving forward. New control systems, weapons control systems, aircraft control systems have been developed. Today we are talking about 4++ generation aircraft, the new planes that will enter service with the Lipetsk Aviation Center this year. Earlier we said that young pilots couldn't fly such aircraft. They are technically complicated jets. Today we say that, perhaps, our youth are already more prepared for this equipment. Therefore new complexes are available. And here's the eternal question. Who is stronger? Well, it's probably always open to debate. But of course, we say that we will not lose in this battle.
This year, the Lipetsk Aviation Center is celebrating several anniversaries. It will also take part in the Victory Day Parade and the Max Aviation Show. That means that soon we'll have the pleasure of watching spectacular flight performances that, judging by millions of views on social networks, bring joy to a huge number of fans all over the world. Yulia Shapovalova, RT.